The passing of my father-in-law was already a difficult reality to come to terms with, but what my husband Liam said next was utterly staggering. "Let's get divorced. Now that I've received the inheritance, I don't need you as my financial support anymore." For a moment, I was speechless. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Liam flashed a smug smile and said, "I just inherited about $3 million from my dad, so I don't need to rely on you financially." He then began to voice his frustrations about me. "Do you have any idea how much you've embarrassed me? I had high expectations because my dad arranged our marriage. I thought I'd be getting someone extraordinary, but instead, I got someone so ordinary." "And why did you agree to marry me then? You could have just said no," I countered. "It's obvious, isn't it? It was for the money. Who else would marry someone like you?" His words were cruel. I was stunned into silence for a moment, but I gathered my thoughts quickly. "Fine, here are the divorce papers." I agreed to the divorce, but kept something crucial from Liam, something I hoped he would deeply regret later. My name is Teresa. I'm 39 years old, and I run a fashion company. I married Liam, who is 3 years my junior 3 years ago. Our marriage was arranged by his father, Mr. Willie, the CEO of a company I've collaborated with for many years. Liam, being an only child, was initially poised to succeed his father. However, he showed little interest and lacked the necessary skills, so he was soon out of the running for the position and settled into a regular job instead. What drew me to Liam initially was his easygoing nature. Growing up, people often told me I was too serious and lacked spontaneity. I was frequently praised for being diligent, but sometimes people considered me too rigid. Some of my ex-boyfriends even complained, "You're not fun, it's like I'm dating a boss." These comments were disheartening, but I always wondered if perhaps I was indeed too serious. Being labeled as inflexible was not uncommon for me. I struggled to take things lightly and often became too absorbed in details. To me, Liam seemed to belong to a completely different world. On our first date, he had suggested a restaurant, but when we arrived, it was closed. I would have been flustered by such an unexpected situation, but not Liam. "Let's just go to that diner over there," he said, effortlessly changing plans. For someone as structured as me, his adaptability was eye-opening. I thought that by being with him, I could also learn to be more flexible. That's why I decided to marry him. Many were skeptical about our marriage, some even suggesting I could do better. Even Mr. Willie, my father-in-law, didn't seem thrilled. "Are you sure you want to take on my son? It feels like I'm burdening you with him," he once said to me. Despite my initial belief in Liam's potential, doubts began to surface not long after our marriage. Shortly after our wedding, Liam unexpectedly quit his job, and he didn't bother to discuss it with anyone. He simply stopped showing up. When both I and Mr. Willie confronted him about his sudden decision, his response was unsettling. "Why do I need to work if Teresa's earning enough for both of us?" he stated nonchalantly. Both his father and I were so taken aback by his audacity that we were momentarily speechless. Why would he decide to depend entirely on my income? On our first date, a similar display of his carefree attitude had charmed me. He had suggested a restaurant, but upon finding it closed, he casually proposed we go to a nearby diner instead. While such a change in plans would have unsettled me, Liam's ease of adapting had seemed refreshing. I thought his flexibility might help me become less rigid, which influenced my decision to marry him. Many had reservations about our union, even suggesting I could find a better match. Mr. Willie, my father-in-law, seemed particularly concerned, asking me, "Are you sure you want to take this on? It feels like I'm burdening you with him." At the time, I felt that no one truly appreciated Liam's value. However, their warnings soon proved prescient. Liam's reluctance to work became a recurring issue. Despite numerous discussions, where even Mr. Willie tried to intervene, Liam's mindset remained unchanged. "Even if I work, I can't earn as much as Teresa does," he would argue. Shortly after we married, he brazenly embraced the role of a freeloader. I considered divorcing him then. Such behavior might have been endearing from a young man in his 20s, but coming from a man nearing 38, it was deeply problematic. Eventually, we reached a reluctant compromise that Liam would handle the household chores. It turned out that Liam's parents had divorced a few years earlier, and before their separation, Liam's mother had also struggled with similar issues. It seemed the pattern of avoidance and dependency might have been deeper rooted in Liam than I had initially realized. This revelation only added to the complexity of our situation, leaving me to ponder the true dynamics of our relationship and Liam's character. Liam often used his lack of domestic upbringing as an excuse for his inability to manage household tasks. "I never learned any of this from my mother. She couldn't do anything around the house," he would say. Despite these initial shortcomings, with consistent praise and guidance from me, Liam gradually got the hang of basic chores. However, he never became particularly adept at them. Still, he seemed quite satisfied with his progress, often remarking with a hint of pride, "Thanks to me taking care of the house, Teresa can focus on work. You should be grateful." His confidence, though slightly irksome, wasn't something I wanted to challenge frequently. "Yes, Liam, I appreciate your help," I'd respond, mustering a smile. Though there were times his attitude annoyed me, we generally coexisted quite harmoniously. About a year into our marriage, a significant event unfolded. My father-in-law, who was not known for impulsive decisions, adopted an 8-year-old boy named Brian. Brian appeared to be an ordinary boy, but knowing my father-in-law, there had to be a compelling reason behind his action. One day, I asked him about it in private. He made me promise to keep the conversation confidential before revealing that Brian was the son of a close employee who had died tragically in an accident along with his wife. They had eloped, and with no close relatives to care for Brian, he would have been placed in foster care. Understanding his decision, I responded, "That's very kind of you." Although Liam and I didn't have children and enjoyed considerable freedom, I reassured my father-in-law of my support. "Please rely on me if you need anything." He smiled warmly, grateful for my offer. As promised, he did turn to me for help occasionally, especially on nights when he was unable to return home due to work or other commitments. I took care of Brian during these times. Initially, Brian was a bit reserved, but he soon began to feel comfortable around me. Observing his efforts to adapt and fit in was touching. Liam, however, did not share my feelings. He seemed displeased with Brian's presence in our lives, which was understandable to some extent, given his complex feelings about his father bringing another child into our home. Liam's reluctance to embrace Brian made me consider the deeper layers of his discontent and the dynamics within our family. When I attempted to discuss Brian's adoption with Liam, his reaction was disheartening. "Adopting him? What is Dad thinking? This is going to cut into my inheritance. I was hoping to get everything," he complained. It became clear that Liam wasn't conflicted about Brian as a person. He was merely worried about the financial implications. "I'm going to talk to Dad about this. I'm not cool with it," he declared one day before confronting his father. Upon his return, Liam was surprisingly cheerful. I approached him cautiously, asking, "How did it go?" "It's all good. My share isn't changing," he replied with a smile. "What do you mean?" I asked, puzzled. Liam explained with a sense of pride, "Dad's making Brian give up his rights to the inheritance because I'm his real son." I was taken aback. Could my father-in-law, who had spoken so kindly of Brian, really plan to exclude him? It seemed out of character, and something felt off, but Liam was too pleased with the outcome to notice my concern. "Well, if my father-in-law says so, there must be a reason. Anyway, he's still young. We won't have to deal with his inheritance for a long time. Maybe I'll divorce Liam before then, who knows?" I thought to myself half-jokingly. However, life took an unexpected turn. A year later, my father-in-law had a serious accident and passed away. Losing him so suddenly was shocking. I had known him longer than I had known Liam, and he had always been a principled man, both in his professional life and at home. Overwhelmed with grief, I prepared for the funeral while struggling with my profound sense of loss. Liam, on the other hand, appeared oddly detached from the situation. Perhaps the suddenness of his father's death left him in disbelief. During the funeral, I took the lead in organizing the proceedings since Liam seemed distant and uninvolved. I tried my best to hold back tears, but the sight of young Brian crying broke my heart. Liam, in contrast, didn't shed a single tear. Instead of showing sadness, he looked restless and, oddly enough, almost pleased, which I found disturbing. His lack of emotion and strange demeanor during such a painful time made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about the man I had married. I confronted Liam, feeling something was off with his demeanor. "Aren't you sad about your dad?" I asked, hoping to understand his apparent lack of sorrow. His response caught me off guard. "Oh, I'm definitely sad, but, I'm also kind of excited. Oops, I guess I let that slip, huh?" He chuckled lightly. "Come on, Teresa. Dad was the CEO, right? He must have left a lot of money. How much do you think he left behind?" It was then I realized that Liam hadn't been lost in thought. From before the funeral until now, he hadn't shown any genuine grief for his father. Instead, he was smiling at the thought of the inheritance he expected to receive. "What's gotten into you?" I exclaimed, unable to hide my shock. "Well, think about it. We're divorced, my mom isn't getting any of it, and Brian, being adopted, won't get any inheritance, so it's all mine. You think I can't be happy about that?" Liam's smirk widened, his expression nearing laughter. Seeing him like that, so utterly pleased at the prospect of his gain following his father's death, was disturbing. "Say whatever you want," I said, feeling an urge to walk away. But before I could leave, there was one more thing I needed to address: Brian's situation. With my father-in-law gone, I wanted to ensure Brian had a stable home. "Liam, I've asked to let Brian stay with us for a while. If not, he might end up in foster care. I want to raise him myself. Are you okay with taking him in?" Liam surprisingly agreed with a smile. "Sure, Teresa. What you do has nothing to do with me anymore." Then he handed me a piece of paper. It was green, a divorce paper. "What's this?" I asked, confused. "Let's get a divorce now. Now that I got the inheritance, I don't need my ATM anymore," Liam said coldly. For a moment, I couldn't grasp the full extent of his words. Had he just referred to me as an ATM, implying I was no longer needed? "What do you mean?" I pressed for clarity. Liam smirked again, probably enjoying the moment. "I got around $3 million from my dad's inheritance, so I don't need you anymore. With this much, I don't have to work. I don't have to please you," he explained, revealing the depths of his self-interest and lack of empathy. Liam's behavior left me stunned. The inheritance, a result of my father-in-law's passing, seemed to trigger an unsettling change in him. He behaved as if he had won a large lottery, not showing any sign of grief. Instead, he was practically jubilant, a reaction that painfully underscored how money can profoundly alter someone's actions. Perhaps, I thought, Liam was simply overwhelmed by the sudden windfall. "Calm down, Liam, let's talk about this," I urged, placing my hand on his shoulder in an attempt to ground him. Liam shrugged off my hand with a jolt and snapped at me furiously. "Shut up, you boring woman! I only married you because my dad set us up and you were a CEO, but I've always felt suffocated with you." He continued to air his grievances, recounting how disappointed he was to end up with someone he deemed as mundane as me after our arranged meeting. "If that's how you felt, you could have just said no to the marriage. I never forced you," I retorted, refusing to be portrayed as the villain. "It's obvious, isn't it? For the money. Who else would marry someone like you?" Liam jeered, openly admitting that his motivations were purely financial. His mockery was a painful echo of his true sentiments. Liam, unabashedly, began to reveal more shocking truths. I had a significant debt. My dad said if I changed my ways and devoted myself to you, he would pay it off. So of course, I married you. His words confirmed that his love was never genuine. It was all a financial arrangement. Seeing Liam laugh so cruelly, I realized that I no longer recognized the man I had married. With a resolute mind, I decided to forego the advice I had initially planned to give him and started filling out the divorce papers without hesitation. Liam, who had been advocating for a divorce, seemed somewhat surprised to see my decisiveness. "Hey, are you thinking of getting a divorce now?" "Fine, here's the divorce papers," I declared, feeling a sense of liberation as I wrote them. Now we're total strangers. Whatever happens from now on doesn't concern the other. You can live with that kid and I can hang out with younger women. We're free, Liam said, his tone showing he was ecstatic about the situation. From what I could tell, he hadn't been unfaithful during our marriage, which was one of the few surprises left in our relationship. I never suspected it, but now none of it mattered anymore. Seeing Liam so thrilled about the divorce, I couldn't help but remark, "Interesting, Liam. If you were this happy about it, you should have asked for a divorce sooner." "I had my reasons. I wanted the money," Liam replied nonchalantly, stuffing the divorce papers into his bag before hastily leaving our shared home. The house suddenly felt too large and empty, a reminder of the life I once shared with Liam. It was time for a change. With Brian now in my life, I thought it would be best to start fresh somewhere new. Selling the house and moving closer to my parents seemed like a sensible decision, especially to provide Brian with a stable and supportive environment. Although it meant he would have to change schools, Brian was agreeable to the idea. "It's a bit sad, but now we can look for a new place without any reservations," he said. Finding the right place took some time, but eventually I made a decision. Proximity to my parents and a great location were my top priorities. The house we found was expensive, but it was worth it considering Brian's needs and the benefits of the location. When Brian and I visited the property, his eyes lit up at the sight of the spacious and beautifully decorated house, complete with a swimming pool. While I hadn't planned on a pool, Brian's excitement made it all worthwhile. "Wow, this is amazing!" Brian exclaimed. His happiness was what mattered most to me, and so we moved in. Settling into our new home took some time, but it gradually became a comforting sanctuary for both of us. Then, out of the blue, I received a call from Liam. He sounded desperate and wanted to meet to apologize. Curious about his sudden change of heart, I agreed to meet him. I left Brian with my mom and went to the diner where Liam was waiting. He looked pale and distraught as I approached. "Teresa," he called out, standing up. I gave him a cold look. "What do you want, Liam? We're supposed to be strangers now." "Don't say that. The truth is, my dad had debts. Damn, I never thought—" "Wait, didn't you get $3 million from your inheritance? Just use that to pay off your debts," I interrupted. "No, the debts are more than what I inherited," Liam explained, revealing that he had inherited more financial trouble than assets. Liam looked defeated. "Teresa, you must have some savings. We used to be married. Please help me," he begged, trying to muster a charming smile. But did Liam forget how he had treated me? After all the times he made me feel insignificant, even calling me an ATM, why would I want to help him now? "You regretted marrying me, huh? After everything you said, now you want help? Well, back then, I never thought I'd be in this situation." Liam tried to justify his sudden need for help. "Sorry, I can't help you. I don't have the money," I stated firmly. "What do you mean? I heard your business is doing great," Liam argued, not ready to let go. "That's not true. I wish you'd stop blaming me for your mistakes. I'm not lying. I just don't have money to lend. Not every bank lends to everyone, right? Why would I lend if I don't expect it back?" Liam looked guilty for a moment, perhaps remembering his harsh treatment of me. Liam's lack of an apology didn't surprise me. His pride was too deep-seated. "Why are you being so cold? Do you still care about me?" he pressed, seemingly forgetting his earlier harshness. "Oh, did you forget what you said when we divorced? We're strangers now, nothing to do with each other. Weren't those your words?" His attempt to play the victim baffled me. "I might have said that, but I didn't mean it. I never thought things would end up like this," Liam confessed, a hint of sadness in his voice as he leaned on the table. He then mentioned something about life insurance, but his father's lawyer had told him he wasn't the beneficiary. "Oh, really?" I chuckled, which seemed to catch Liam off guard. "You don't think Teresa would be the one your dad left it to, do you?" "No, it's not me." "Then why did you laugh?" "I just felt a bit sorry for you, that's all. If it was insurance, I wouldn't have inherited the debts." "Exactly. That's why my father-in-law had Brian give up the inheritance. He left something for Brian through life insurance. Brian was the beneficiary of my father-in-law's life insurance," I explained, clearing up his misunderstanding. "Is that all you wanted to talk about? If so, I'm leaving. There's nothing I can do for you," I stated firmly, standing up to leave. "Wait, can't we start over? I was just upset about my dad back then, but I truly care about you, Teresa," Liam pleaded. "You mean you only see me as a dollar sign, right?" I knew Liam was trying to deny it, but I wasn't fooled. "After all, I don't have a single dime to give to someone like you. Well, someone important is waiting for me at home." With that, I left the diner, hearing Liam's cries fade behind me, but they didn't affect me. I hurried home, wondering if Brian might be hungry or if he had received something from his grandma. I quickly headed to the subway station. As for Liam, I heard he's working multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debts. With no work experience, qualifications, or motivation, he couldn't secure a full-time job anywhere. I once saw him at a convenience store while on my way to a client meeting. He looked much older and thinner, a shadow of his former self. Liam, who had always relied on others, was now facing the consequences. There's no sympathy left in me for him. On the other hand, I'm living peacefully with Brian. We even argue sometimes, which is saddening when Brian ignores me after a fight, but I try to see it as a sign that he's opening up. I plan to support him until he can stand on his own 2 feet, fulfilling what I believe would have been my father-in-law's wish. This has become my goal in life now.